Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here with us this morning. We are missing some of our comrades. They've gone off to Italy. We had quite a group of pilgrims leave here, joined by other pilgrims from the village and other places, I think, in the Ananda world. And they're meeting in Italy to go on pilgrimage there. I think there's 45 or 50 of them all together. But we got two of theirs. We have two Italian friends visiting us today from Assisi. It was a pretty good exchange. And Sudarshan, welcome, also being with us today. My name is Lorna. I think most of you know us. My name's Lorna. This is Bharati, and it's our joy to be here with you this morning. It is such a privilege every Sunday to get together and do this, and to come together with these great teachings that bring so much light into our lives. This topic, surrender, is an interesting one. I don't know about you, but I have two older brothers. And when I was growing up, surrender did not mean victory. When I think of the word surrender, it means I lose, you win. They would hold me down and tickle me until I finally surrendered. There was no sense of victory at all. It was always frustration. It was always a sense that I lost again. And surrender is a real hard word for our egos. It's a word that just carries with it so many things that our ego rebels against. And especially, I think, in America, here, we have such a strong, independent attitude that we can do anything and no one's going to tell us what to do, and we can do it our way. And that has a lot of power in it too. It's why Yogananda came here. He said he loved the American spirit of can-do. He said, Americans don't know how hard self-realization is. They just say, yes, sure, why not? Let's do it. It's why he built this work of self-realization here in America, because we had the energy to move forward and to actually set our sights on freedom and make progress. But it's still a tough one. It's still a tough one for us. He also said that those words of Jesus, let thy will, not mine, be done, when he was in the scene that we know of where he was in the garden, that is often misunderstood. That a lot of people take that teaching and think that means we don't have our own will, that we're not supposed to have our own will, we're supposed to just give up our own will. He said, of course, that's not what's supposed to be going on. In fact, a lot of Yogananda's teachings are about willpower. We need to have strong, dynamic willpower in order to make any progress at all, in order to do anything. Will is actually what keeps us in the body. Will is actually what keeps us moving and doing anything. Yogananda said, without using any willpower, we would just be laying on the couch. He didn't have the term couch potato then, but he said we'd just lay on the couch. Even opening our eyes, moving our fingers, doing anything involves our willpower. And we need to develop that. And the willpower that we have in our egos, the little willpower that we feel, is just a little reflection. It's just a little glimmer of the divine will, of the will that we're supposed to be tuning into. And Yogananda gave us all kinds of exercises and techniques to exercise our willpower. The main one that we know of is the energization exercises. The energization exercises are not just a physical technique. He said the reason they work is because we're focusing on the energy, not on the muscles and the physicality of it. But we're supposed to be working with the energy flow and learning to direct the energy to where we want it to go and then consciously withdrawing it. And that's an exercise of our willpower. And if you read The Whispers from Eternity, if you read any of his other books, his affirmations, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of techniques and affirmations and teachings that he gave us to exercise our willpower. There's a really wonderful story that I have to read you because it's just so much fun to read it in his words. He talks about the evolution of our willpower, starting as a little baby and the kind of willpower we come in. He said the very first actual sort of the birth of our willpower when we're born in each incarnation is that cry of the baby as soon as it's born. Because as soon as we feel that, the lungs expanding, the discomfort of the world, we want to start exercising and making it different. We want to start saying, I want to do something about this. And so he talks about how the willpower grows as we evolve, grows with us and evolves and becomes more expansive and becomes stronger as we go through our stages from infancy into adulthood. But this is a story he tells about willpower when he was very small. He doesn't say exactly how old he was. I shall tell you of an experience when I was a baby. I remember when I was in that state of mechanical will. I always did just as my mother told me, and I was labeled as an angel. But one day I was taken in a carriage to a drugstore, and there I saw some little orange-colored candies. I was very much attracted to them, and so I asked my nurse to buy me some. He wouldn't do it. Then I remained quiet, and he took me home. I had my dinner, and then afterward I told my mother I wanted some candy. She said, no, go to bed. Then after a little while I said, Mother, I want the little orange-colored candies. And Mother said, go to bed. Then I cried louder, I want the orange-colored candies. So finally, Mother had to go and wake up the drugstore man and get those candies for me. I was happy. Why? Because I'd suddenly used my own will. I enjoyed the most wonderful feeling that I had for the first time, used my own will. But I remember I was branded the next morning as a naughty baby because I had my own way for once. And then he goes on in this lesson, he actually goes on to encourage parents to allow their children to exercise their willpower sometimes. Because he said, will is desire plus energy. And if we don't learn how to do that, if we don't learn how to take a desire that we have and fulfill it and actually put out energy and make it happen, we're never going to be self-realized. We're never going to make progress on the spiritual path because we have to do something. We have to move forward and we have to do it under our own volition. But where does surrender come in? Then there's that sense, well then how do I do both? How do I move forward, exercise my willpower, do the energization exercises, and also surrender? His definition of divine will is the projected energy of God which brought forth creation. That's termed divine will. The projected energy of God that brought forth creation. Divine will is in every atom. Divine will is in every part of all that is. That's what we're trying to get in tune with. That's what we're trying to surrender to. We're not trying to surrender to something outside of ourselves, something different that's imposing it on us, like my brothers. It's something that's inherent within us already. It's something that's already ours. We're surrendering to the truth that the divine will, which created the universe and all that is, has no boundaries. There are no limits. There is nothing that the divine will can't do. And in the words of Jesus, Jesus said, that all these and more you will be able to do. He said, it's ours as well. We are that. And that's what it is that we're trying to surrender to. The fact that little tiny willpower, that tension that we feel in that struggle of surrender is just, it's the ego saying, I want to do my own thing. I want to do I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up what I have going. I remember being in it was a group, what do I want to say? It was like a group therapy session. I was supporting a friend who was in an addiction program. And we were talking about one of the principles is surrender. Is surrender to a higher power. They don't use the word God, but it's surrender to a higher power. And of course, there's a great deal of resistance to that. And there was part of me that just thought, if it's working so well for you, if what you're doing with your little willpower and making your own choices and doing your own thing it really, really works, then, why are you here? Why is your whole life a mess? Divine Mother doesn't impose herself. Again, unlike my brothers, she doesn't impose herself on us and say, you've got to do it this way. Or like, have you ever walked a dog that doesn't want to go walking, that doesn't want to walk? And they just put on their brakes and you wind up having to drag them or pick them up and carry them, which is pretty ridiculous, but, they pick them up and carry them, or trying to get a little kid from one place to another that doesn't want to go. In those circumstances, we have to use our will, we have to impose it, and we have to make something happen for somebody else that's not cooperating. And we tend to put on those qualities on our divine parents as well. We tend to think of our Divine Mother, our Heavenly Father, being like that. But the fact is, Divine Mother just waits. She just waits for us to be ready to cooperate, to be ready to be in tune. She waits for the opening where we actually want to cooperate and we want to go in that direction, and then it flows. I had an interesting experience on the trip to California one time. I had the kids in the car and we'd gone down to visit relatives, and coming back my car had trouble. It was an automatic transmission and I had transmission issues. And we were, I can't even remember exactly where we were. I think we may have been in Roseburg or someplace, but I had to get the car worked on, and they told me they couldn't fix the transmission there. I would have to get it back to Portland. They would have to order parts and everything. So I had the kids in the car, I wanted to get home. They said, okay, it's safe to drive the car, but it's not going to shift, the automatic transmission, so it wouldn't shift out of, I think, it wouldn't shift to a higher gear. It wouldn't shift. So I had to drive like less than 30 miles. I had to drive like 30 miles an hour all the way back. So as long as I stayed, within that, I was fine. And of course, I was tired. I didn't want to deal with trying to find alternate routes off the freeway and try to find my way all the way back up here to Portland. So I went on the freeway. But I had to drive on the shoulder the whole way. I had to drive on the shoulder of the freeway. Have you ever had to drive on the shoulder of the freeway? It was awful. The shoulder, the shoulder is out of the main flow. So you've got broken bits of things, you've got big rubber tires that have exploded that are there on the shoulder. You've got gravel, and you've got, carcasses of animals that had moved on to a higher life, and it's a mess. And the tension was incredible, and you've got semis and everybody else going by, zooming by at, 65 miles an hour while I'm tooting along trying to do this. Had to do that. I don't know how, it felt like forever. It was a couple hours. And then at some point, I could feel something shift in the engine. It felt like something happened. It moved, and I tested it. And I found that I could actually, I could accelerate. The transmission had actually shifted. So I accelerated up to, 55, and I moved into the main flow of traffic. And it was such a relief. It was so smooth. It was so, everything, my whole body relaxed, Suddenly the whole world looked like a much nicer place to be. And I just, as I did that, I just thought, this is what it's like. This is what it's like to shift into and get into the flow of what Ananda always says, what's trying to happen, what that divine flow actually is. suddenly there's no reason to fight it. There's no reason to resist. There's no reason to be tense and to try to do it your way and to maneuver like this around everything. You're in a flow that is perfect and right and harmonious with everything that is. That's what we're trying to surrender to. That's what we're trying to get into when we talk about getting into divine will. That word will, we tend to separate it out and say there's this other. There's me and there's this other. But it's all one. It's all one thing that's trying to happen. And we just constantly have to come up against that lesson over and over and over again. There's only one thing happening, and there's only one reality, and we're part of it. We're not separate from it. It's also a little like watching I have a vision also of seeing something grow, a flower, that will and that divine will of growing into that and getting to a place where we feel like it's right, where we feel like it's right for us, and that we're in that flow. Swami talks about willingness. He uses, Master in a lot of his writings, he talked about willpower. Swami Swami Kriyananda, I think we all know, is the direct disciple of Yogananda and the founder of Ananda, so we have a lot of his example for us of what this looks like. And he talked about willingness as a way of exercising our willpower. That if we're willing, if we step into something and say yes to life, then really what we're doing is we're leaving our own will behind, and we're saying, whatever's happening, I'll be a part of it. I'll do that. I'm willing to step in. Yesterday we had a really wonderful day. I had a wonderful day. I'm sure everybody had a wonderful day yesterday. But my wonderful day started here because we had a memorial service for our friend Lynn Shirley, and we had, her family was here, and we had a beautiful service and a time of sharing. And it was just so sweet. And it started with, early with Melissa and I being here and arranging flowers and getting things set up, and then sharing with the family, and I was the sound person, and we're doing that, and we had wonderful music, and then we had wonderful food, and it just flowed from one thing to the next, and then people dispersed, and it was time to clean up and get ready for Sunday service so that we could all come here. And then meanwhile, over at our community, we had Harvest Day. And Harvest Day is a Seva Day, a work day where we all came together. And a lot of the faces that I see here this morning were there making that all happen. And I went over there, and I got in, right at the tail end of everything that was happening. So I came in and asked Vajra, what can I do? And he put me to work working on the lawn chairs. We were washing all of the lawn chairs and lawn furniture so we could pack them away for the winter. And then moved from there into the kitchen, and there wasn't any question. It was just such a lovely day, because there was no question about what I want, what I need to do, what I'm trying to make happen. It was just this wonderful, beautiful flow of energy the whole day. It didn't matter what I was doing. It was all the same thing going on. And yet I was still me. I was still me. I wasn't losing anything of myself and my unique contribution and my individuality. Yogananda says that every atom is dowered with individuality. Every atom. We can't lose it just by going with divine will. We don't lose who it is and who we are and what's trying to express itself through us. We can see it in Swami Kriyananda. It was a wonderful example. He said towards the end of his life, he was saying he didn't know which thoughts were Master's, which were his. He was so completely in tune, so completely surrendered to whatever the divine will was that came through his guru, that he felt that he had no will of his own anymore. And yet he didn't turn out to be a carbon copy of Yogananda. He was still more himself and more the unique expression of spirit that came through him than he had ever been before. He just became more and more of what divine spark, what divine individuality was there. It just became more and more and more clear, which is that whole list that we heard in the reading today from the Bhagavad Gita, all the qualities that come through when we actually surrender and we become that. Swami was a perfect example of that, but there's examples of that all over. Recently, I was watching a video. I watched a video called Matthew. It's about the book of Matthew. I don't know if anybody else has seen it. I would recommend it. It was quite a joy to watch. What they did is it was a dramatization of the story of Christ through the eyes of Matthew, who wrote the Gospel of Matthew. He was the disciple that was the tax collector of the 12. And so what they did is they took just the words from the Bible. There was no other narration. There was no other storytelling or any editorializing about it. They used just exactly what is found in the Gospel and to tell the story. And then they played it all out, and it was beautifully photographed and wonderfully done. In the beginning, it was a little bit odd because I had to get into it because I was looking for sort of a more traditional type of dramatization, a story, and what you're listening to, as I said, what you're listening to is just what is there in the book of Matthew. But the man who played Jesus, I don't remember his name, the man who played Jesus was quite wonderful, and they did a lovely job of showing him as a very warm, laughing, loving, kind, hugging his disciples and being real. And I was observing that in that song that we sang this morning. We sang Living Water, which is in reference to the story in the Bible of Jesus coming to the woman of Samaria at the well and talking about the living water that he would offer was not in the well water, that he was the living water. And Darshana read to us a little before when we were practicing this morning about what Swami said about that song, that he said the Bible referred to Jesus as needing to go to Samaria in his travels. And Swami explains that the reason he needed to go to Samaria was to meet the woman, that was his purpose, is that he needed to go there, which just, the masters are always looking for us. They're just looking to make us their own, So he goes all the way through Samaria, which was someplace that he didn't otherwise need to go, just to find her and just to come in contact with her. But the song says, walk by his side. And whenever I've sung that song, all the years that I've sung that song, I've always imagined walking with Jesus, just walking with him. And in this movie about Matthew, the way they string the story together is there's a lot of scenes of him walking with the disciples. And as I'm watching the movie, at first it's a little odd. I think, okay, here we are walking again. They're all walking. But then when you think about it, if you read the life of Jesus and all of the places that he went to, if you look at a map and all of the places that he visited in the 3 short years of his ministry, he went a lot of places. And he didn't have any other means to travel except walking. So the disciples were with him and were probably constantly walking side by side on the road, over the hills, through the fields, over rocks and across rivers, and just walking and going to the next place and talking and sharing with people and then walking again. And the movie, that song kept going through my head as I was watching this, just walk by his side. How much must have been shared? The Gospels just give us just this little hints at what it must have been like to be with Jesus. And I just thought of all of those times, those hours and hours and days of just walking with Jesus side by side, hour after hour, and what they shared and what they did together. And it's a beautiful vision. It's a beautiful picture of that surrender and moving with divine grace, just getting in the flow and walking with the masters always, just side by side. Not saying, well, I want to go over here, I want to go over there, or let's stop here now. Let's just walking and moving in the same direction, and completely surrendering to what it is that's trying to happen. The other thing that I noticed or came up for me about the movie is I've seen a lot of movies. It's always been one of my favorite things to do is any of the biblical stories, since Cecil B. DeMille and all of those. Watching the depictions of those. And there's always a lot of criticism about how people portray saints, how people portray Jesus, how people portray the disciples, and how they just portray the scriptures in movies, because we all have our little pictures in our head of what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to sound like. And but again, there's nothing that... There's always going to be the individual, what am I trying to say? This man who portrayed Jesus did a wonderful job, and I'm sure it wasn't a true, perfect portrayal of exactly what Jesus was, but he did a beautiful job of portraying what he felt and what his experience was of being Jesus and of trying to impart the message that Jesus gave. And it was just another example to me of how our individuality, that individuality in every atom is going to be expressed through each one of us. And the way this man portrayed Jesus is going to be different than the way somebody else portrays Jesus. But it doesn't make it any less true. The truth is behind that. It's behind that individuality. It was rich. I would recommend it. But what we need to remember right now is this idea of victory. Focus on victory instead of the surrender part. In surrender lies victory. That's what we're reaching for. That's what it is that we all want. We want that freedom. We look at Swami Kriyananda, we look at the saints, and there's part of us that just longs to be where they are, in that complete and total surrender to a power that's greater than us, but also is a power that is us. It's our own nature. It's what is really trying. The reason we have that longing is because it's true, and it's because we recognize it as what it is that we really are. It's where we really belong, in that divine flow. We have the word God. The last thing I wanted to say is just, we have the word God, surrender to God. I think sometimes the struggle that we have with that idea is the word God. We just don't, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It doesn't, there's not a common understanding of the word God, and not in our culture. And it implies, in many ways, it implies something separate than ourselves. In Sanskrit, the word is Sat Chit Ananda. It's harder to spell, longer to write than just God. But it refers to that divine force, that creative power, that truth that we're longing for. And Yogananda translated it as ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. That's what we're surrendering to. That's what we are a part of when we let go of all those things that we're trying to hang on to. And my experience yesterday of, as I said, was flowing from one activity to another. Just a little hint, just a little glimmer of what that Satchitananda can be. That it's not, it doesn't matter what we're doing, and yet it does matter. Everything matters because everything's a part of that joy. And it's not, oh, here we go again, you know. It's more of the same. It's not boring. Master put that ever new, I think, in there, particularly for us Western minds, for us Americans, because we just can't stand it unless something is new and improved and getting better all the time. And we're just always refining and just changing things out just because, you know, just because we get bored real easily. So that sense of joy, of that divine will flowing through us is ever new. There's no end to it, and there's no smallness to it. It's just ever expanding and ever new. Let me read Whispers to close. This is Whispers from Eternity, number 199. Endless thrills of delight. I attuned my life with thine. Now my life has become a long, unbroken inspiration. Thy fountain of bliss refreshes and delights me night and day, whether I be wakeful, fast asleep, or dreaming fondly of thee. Oh, what has become of me? Delight on overwhelming delight. Endless, indescribable thrills of divine delight spray unceasingly over me. O aged nectar, wine of centuries, I found thee at last and will taste of thy sweetness forever, forever, forever. That's what we want to surrender to.